Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Happy April 1st, April Fool's Day. Don't worry, this is not a prank video. I didn't really think about it until this morning when I saw another prank video on YouTube. And to do those well, they take a lot of planning. So I will spare you. It's this time of year, March into early April in this area, which is we're about 41 degrees north here in the Chicago area, right in the middle of the country. The only moderation to our climate is we have this big lake, which tends to keep winters not quite as cold as they would be, and summers a little cooler, as long as you're within about 10 miles of the lake. Not always. If the wind's out of the wrong direction, those go away. Anyway, but the last week it's been rainy, gray, and drab, so getting outside to do any kind of photography has been really problematic. Plus, we don't have any snow left. There's no leaves out. There are a few early flowers coming up, snowdrops, crocuses, neither of which are native to this area. So I haven't been able to do much photography, which is kind of a problem. But what I thought I'd do today is talk about a couple of lenses, a couple prime lenses, and then give some examples. And these two that I have here are the Lumix 20mm f1.7 and the Lumix 25mm f1.7. Both of these lenses I find very useful. When I bought my Lumix GX85 several years ago, it came with a 12 to 32 millimeter zoom, and I soon added the 45 to 150, but I wanted to have a fast prime with me when I was traveling, so that if I was in a city and walking around in the evening, once it got darker, I had a lens I could still shoot with. So I bought the 20 millimeter. Found it to be an excellent lens. Really unobtrusive because it's so compact, sharp wide open, maybe a little bit softer in the corners, decent bokeh when you have enough distance between your subject and the background, and great for low light outside. Also comes with a pouch, which is cool. One of the knocks against this lens is the slow autofocus, and in bright conditions, it's really not that big of a problem. What I think people have a problem with is if you go inside into a dark area and you want to shoot available light, just think the inside of a bar or a pub or something like that. Depending on the camera body, I discovered that the GX85 had some issues with this lens. If it was inside and not terribly bright, you'd get a fair amount of hunting. I mean, the solution is to switch to manual focus and turn on focus peaking and just focus manually. But yeah, I could see why that's an issue for some people. But there is a reason why this has relatively slow autofocus, and I think it is worth mentioning, because sometimes I'll see people online saying, well, why don't they, when they redesign this lens, because this is a Mark II that's really just a cosmetic difference, why didn't they put in fast autofocusing? Well, the problem is because this is a pancake lens, and at this focal length, at 20 millimeters, the distance that you have to move optical elements is at this focal length is fairly great to depend on just an internal focusing group. It's just not enough room in here to do that. So this uses what's called unit focusing, and what that means is the entire lens assembly moves in and out. So every element in here is moving as a unit. So unit focus is essentially what that is. Now, that's not uncommon in pancake lenses. When I shot Canon and I had an APS-C body, I had the EFS 24mm f2.8. Interestingly, about the same field of view as this. So this is 40 millimeter field of view on a Lumix body, and the Canon 24 millimeter, the EFS, is about a 38 millimeter field of view on a Canon body. But guess what? That lens used unit focusing. Probably the same problem here. Now, I have here the Lumix 14 millimeter. which is a 28 millimeter field of view equivalent. And this lens, anybody who has it, you know that this is a fairly quick focusing lens. But here's the thing. At 14 millimeters, most stuff is going to be in focus anyway, even at f2.5. You don't have to do a lot of shifting to get things in focus. So there's actually, I'm pretty sure, just an internal focusing group in here, but it doesn't really have to move much. This also, the 20 millimeter also has the focusing motor is fairly loud. It's one of the loudest that I've heard. You really can't use it for video. As a matter of fact, that's actually another downside that I just remembered, is that when you switch to video, you're forced to use single autofocus. In other words, non-continuous. You cannot use continuous autofocus with this lens when you're shooting video. So that's essentially why this has that issue, and why engineering a solution to that probably would make this lens cost a lot more than it does. Now, moving to the Lumix 25 millimeter. It's a less expensive lens than the 20. But I have found it to be really a very capable and sharp lens, even at f1.7 wide open. The thing about this lens, where I would pick it over the 20, is that little extra focal length. You know, if you're outside walking around a city, I consider the 20 millimeter here to be sort of a 35 millimeter equivalent. I mean, it's not quite that wide, but still, if you need to fill the frame with something and not get real close, the 20 millimeter is going to have a little bit of problem doing that. You may need to get too close to your subject if you're in the city and your subject may mind you getting close. The 20 millimeter is a problem for that. Whereas the classic 50 millimeter focal length equivalent of the 25 millimeter is really what works well for street photography. So if I'm going out doing street photography now, I just bought this 14 millimeter a few months ago. I would probably take these two lenses. This still is a fairly small lens, not going to grab a lot of attention like a zoom would. So, you know, that's essentially my take on these. Which one should you buy? Depends on what you're doing. I mean, if you're traveling and you just want to have a prime with you just for when it gets dark, perfect. 20 millimeter is a perfect lens for that. If you're doing a lot of street photography, I think you can save your money, because this costs quite a bit more than the 25 millimeter, and get the 25 millimeter and be done with it. So that's the story on those. I'm going to run a little bit of a slideshow with both of these lenses. They are labeled as to which lens took which photo, but you can see that between the two of them, there's not a lot of difference as far as clarity and sharpness. And that does remind me of one thing I was going to mention, is that I've seen people complain online about the 25 millimeter, saying it gives muddy output. Well, this one doesn't. And that just goes back to what I have said in the past about testing your lenses. You know, these days when you buy a lens online, there's a return policy. It's real important to go out and take photos with a lens to make sure everything's good with it. And if not, return it, because that muddiness problem might be a sample variation problem. It's also possible that early versions and early copies of this lens had that issue and it's been fixed. And sometimes companies fix things and then they don't let anybody know that they fixed it, because they don't want to admit that there was a problem in the first place. I had that experience with Canon as well. So anyway, here's a little slideshow with some images from my area, and any questions or comments about those, please pop them down into the comments and I'll respond to those. Something else I want to mention before I sign off here is that I am currently selling this Aperture Amaran 528S light panel. This is the first light panel that I bought. It's in the box, has everything it came with, and it is on eBay, and the auction is ending on Sunday. It's a really great little light panel, a little dated now. Opening bid is $50. Pretty sure nobody's bid yet. Can't imagine it's going to go up much higher, but I use this for doing little company videos for small businesses in the area. It's portable. It runs on a couple of Sony NPF 950, 970 type batteries, but it also has an AC adapter you can plug in. So if you want to power it and you can charge the batteries actually when they are in the unit. So that's something you're interested in. It's on eBay. It's the Aperture Amaran 528S. It's the only one up there as far as I know right now. Anyway, hopefully this was interesting to you. If so, please pop that like button. If you're a subscriber, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm Todd Banner, and I will see you next time.